Hello everybody. I will record several videos about skeletal system. When you log in on Canvas, you should find a list of all the bones and their features that you need to know for your lab exam. So one list will be on the axial skeleton and another list will be on the appendicular skeleton. So I'm planning to do this video pretty short because I will only show you all these bones and their features. And please make your free account on BioDigital, and instructions how to do it is also on Canvas. And in BioDigital you can choose, look at the body by system, so you can choose skeletal system and then you choose male or female skeleton, and you will be able to see all skeleton, every single bone. You will be able to remove this bone and look at all this feature. So it's really very good and free software. So please take advantage of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. So I have this skull here, and skull is a part of the axial skeleton, and then include cranial bones and facial bones. So cranial bones, that's a frontal bone. You have two parietal bones, right? Then on the back, that's occipital bone over here. Also on the side, you can see temporal bone, right? So here's the temporal bone. Zygomatic bone, that's a zygomatic bone. Maxilla, upper jaw, mandible, nasal bones over here, right? And inside the nasal cavity, you will see this part of the bone that is part of the nasal septum. This is called vomer. And on the lateral side of the nasal cavity, over here and over here, this is inferior nasal concha. And I will show you these bones again. Right now it's just like overview. Right, so this pretty much the bones that you can see from external view of the skull, right? But as I told you, I'm gonna go one by one and show you not only a bone, but also the parts that you need to know about this bone. Okay, so the first thing is my mandibula actually falling down, so I'm gonna kind of remove it. Yeah, sorry for that, because I don't want it to fall and break. So I'm gonna use the skull without the mandible. Right? Okay. So frontal bone. Let me take this so it has some color. So here's the frontal bone. And in the frontal bone, according to your list, you need to know glabella. So glabella is the region over here, right? So that's a region between your eyebrows. So that's a glabella. Next bone that you need to know, and I'm just telling you, I'm just following this list. So next bone is ethmoid bone. To see the ethmoid bone, I need to open the cranium. So I'm gonna open the cranium. I'm gonna look over here. And this part right here, that's a part of the ethmoid bone. So this protuberance over here, this is called crista galli. So that's a crista galli. And what's surrounding crista galli on the both sides, this is cribriform plate. So crista galli, cribriform plate. Also, you can read in your list, you can read that some important information about this structure. Let's say crista galli, it tells you this is where dura mater attaches, right? Dura is a membrane covering your brain, so dura mater attaches to this crista galli. And cribriform plate, we have like little holes here, and it's a passage of the olfactory nerves. And another things you need to know about ethmoid bone is the middle concha and perpendicular plate. So to find the middle concha, you need to look inside the nasal cavity, and this is lateral wall, right? And this is lateral wall of nasal cavity. So when you look inside this bony structure, superior one, this is actually middle concha. So that's the middle concha, and this is a part of the ethmoid bone. Now you see right in the middle of nasal cavity, you have, this bone, right? And this is part of nasal septum. So upper part, superior part of nasal septum, this part over here, this is a perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone. So middle nasal concha, perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone, crista galli, and surrounding crista galli is cribriform plate. So that's ethmoid bone. Next bone is occipital bone. So I'm gonna put it back for a second. So here's the occipital bone, right? So this point go all the way down to here, right? So that's occipital bone. Now you need to know occipital condyles. So if you look here, right? Well, first this big hole over here, this is called foramen magnum. So foramen magnum. So below this foramen is your spinal cord, and inside, right above it, is the brain, right? It's a medulla oblongata, right? Brainstem, part of the brainstem. Now you also need to know foramen magnum, occipital condyles. So occipital condyles are these bony parts, right, on the both sides of the foramen magnum. So that's occipital condyle, and this is occipital condyle, and they articulate with the first cervical vertebra. Okay, so occipital condyle, foramen magnum, hypoglossal canal. So hypoglossal canal is this opening over here, and on the other side, see, that's the opening over here. So let me make sure you guys can see it right there, right? Hypoglossal canal, and this is the passage of hypoglossal nerve, and external occipital protuberance is this bone over here, this, well, part of the occipital bone. So that's external occipital protuberance. Oh, it's getting heavy to hold this, right? So that's the one. Next, following our list, and again, following our list is sphenoid bone. So again, I need to open the cranium to see sphenoid bone, right? Okay, so so this part over here goes right there, okay, over here and over here, right? That's a sphenoid bone, so it's right over this part. And again, on a biodigital, you actually can remove the sphenoid bone and see how it looks. So on sphenoid bone, we need to find greater and lesser wings. Now this part over here and over here, those are lesser wings, right? So this one and this. And just below it, those are greater wings. So that's a greater wings. This one and lesser wings. Sella Turcica is this area, and this is where pituitary gland sits. Optic canal is this opening over here, this one and this. Oh, cannot get inside. And look, if I put my pointer here, you can see here it is, right? So that's the optic canal, right? This one and that. So optic canal, superior orbital fissure. Superior orbital fissure is this part. And I'll show you from this side. So you look inside the bony orbits, you see this like a big opening, this one and that. This is superior orbital fissure, right? That's superior orbital fissure. And right here I have the optic canal. That's the optic canal. Optic canal, right there, and superior orbital fissure. By the way, we will need this inferior orbital fissure as well. So that's inferior orbital fissure. Superior orbital fissure and inferior orbital fissure. I'm gonna leave it like this so you can see it. So pretty much you can see it now, everything. Superior orbital fissure, optic canal, and inferior orbital fissure. Okay, and pterygoid processes for attachment of some muscles. That's gonna be, okay, I'm trying to see this part, right? This side, let's see, this part over here, pterygoid processes. So, or this part and this, pterygoid processes, and attachment for chewing muscle. Okay, next, parietal bones. Okay, back, and here, parietal bones, right? Right and left parietal bones. So here's a parietal bone. Temporal bone. So this part over here, right? That's a temporal bone. Right, so right there. And in temporal bone, you need to know styloid process, mastoid process. You see this big one? That's a mastoid process. And this look like a little pin. This is a styloid process. So styloid process, mastoid process. Oh my goodness, I almost dropped this one. Okay, zygomatic process is this part. So I don't know if you can see or not, but there is some suture here, right there. So that's a zygomatic process of the temporal bone. So temporal bone and its zygomatic process. And then it joins the zygomatic bone and making this arch, zygomatic arch. Okay, so zygomatic process, external auditory meatus and internal auditory meatus. Let me see. This is this one over here. This. Oh my goodness! Scared me. Okay, I'm telling you, this is pretty heavy. Okay, so that's styloid. Oh, I'm sorry, that's styloid. This is a mastoid process, and over here, that's external acoustic meatus, right? So this one, that's external acoustic meatus. Internal acoustic meatus, I need to go inside, right? So look over here, and this part and this one, right there, that internal acoustic meatus. This one and this one, right? Okay, so here's my external, right? External acoustic meatus, and you look in right there. See this part over here, internal acoustic meatus, or auditory meatus, stylomastoid foramen, stylomastoid. So you find mastoid, you find styloid, and right in between them, see that opening here, right there, stylomastoid foramen. Mandibular fossa. Okay, now look, if I want to attach my mandible, right, let's see how mandible goes in this depression over here, Okay. So right here, right there, that's a mandibular fossa. Oops, no, I'm sorry, that's external acoustic meatus, right here. Yeah, okay, external acoustic meatus, that has like a hole, and right there, that's a fossa. Now, can you see it? Right here. And again, if the mandible would be attached, right, here we go. So that's a mandibular fossa. Mastoid process I already showed you, this big one. Mastoid process and petrous part. Petrous part, you need to look inside. And this part over here and over here, that's petrous part. This one. Right, and this is where in the posterior side of the petrous part you find internal acoustic meatus. Okay, good. So that skull survived. That is good. So let's see what else we need to find. Put it back. Just a second. Okay, so that's back. I keep it on my books. Next, we're moving to facial bones, right? And the first bone that you need to find is a vomer. So vomer is a bone over here. It's inferior part of the nasal septum. So that's the vomer, right? And upper part is perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone, but that's a vomer. It's a singular one bone. Nasal bones, over here, that's a nasal bone. And here's a nasal bone on this side, so that's a nasal bone. Lacrimal bone. To find the lacrimal bone, you look inside the bony orbit and you see this is lacrimal foramen, right? So where we have this hole, that's a lacrimal bone. So that's a lacrimal bone here. And of course on another side, that's a lacrimal bone here. Maxilla actually two bones that are fused in the middle, right? So that's two maxillae making one bone. And on the maxilla, you need infraorbital foramen, and that's it. Orbital, infraorbital foramen. So that's a bony orbit. Infra means below. Infraorbital foramen. And this is where we have infraorbital artery and vein passing through, infraorbital nerve, branch of the maxillary nerve. Now zygomatic bones. This bone's over here, so that's a bone, that's a zygomatic bone. And here's zygomatic bone. And on a zygomatic bone, temporal process of the zygomatic bone. So because that's a temporal process. Yeah, this one. This is the frontal process, and this one is temporal process. So that's a zygomatic bone, and this is temporal process of the zygomatic bone, and this is zygomatic process of the temporal bone. Palatine bones, we need to look on the inferior side, and okay, so this bone over here, oops, and this one, so this part and this part, right? Those are palatine or palatine bones, right? So this part over here, this is the part of the maxilla, upper jaw. It's actually called palatine processes, but here we have palatine bones. Palatine bones are part of the hard palate. Inferior nasal concha. We already know we have this middle nasal concha. That's a part of the ethmoid bone, but below it, inferior to it, is inferior nasal concha. Those are individual small bone. And mandible. Oh, finally we get to the mandible. So here's the mandible, right? And mandible, you need to know body, right? So that's the body of the mandible. Ramus. Ramus means branch. So here's the ramus. So that's the ramus of the mandible. Branch of the mandible. Then you need to know I'm sorry, where I'm reading. Mental foramen. Here's the mental foramen. This is called mental region. So that's two mental foramina. Mandibular foramen are actually inside, right over here and over here. Mandibular foramina, carotenoid process. This one is carotenoid. This one is carotenoid. And this one is condylar process or condyle. So carotenoid process and condyle. And of course, mandible is the only movable part of the skull, right? And it forms a joint with a temporal bone, right? So that's a condyle, and this is mandibular fossa. So it's fit right in the mandibular fossa. Okay, thank you for watching, and I will see you for next video. Hope it was helpful. Bye.